What's up guys, Nathan here. Every league I usually make two videos with starters in them, one that contains a bunch of tried and true starters for those of you who just want a really nice advantage and a solid league start, and one that's a little bit more experimental that sort of contains builds that may or may not be good, might be using new mechanics, and basically are just different builds that I'm considering personally starting as. So that is the purpose of today's video. We're going to be looking at some experimental builds. I have 7 different ones for you today, and not all of them are actually super innovative or unique or using new mechanics, but they all are different builds that I'm just considering playing, and really that's the only precursor to get into a video like this. So without further ado, I don't want to spend too long talking, so let's just jump into the builds. The first build that I have for you today is actually a little bit on the unique side. It is a full LE conversion Blade Blast Inquisitor. Now we don't really know how the shotgunning is going to be working with Blade Blast and the EK and the Blade Fall and the Blade Vortex leaving knives on the ground. That is the big question mark for anybody starting as this. Am I going to be clearing well? Am I going to get some nice spread? Am I going to have a good single target? Is there going to be good shotgunning? I don't know. Is there going to be a level of consistency? I'm not really sure, but what I went with is I sort of just did some generic LE scaling Templar, starting out here, going over to the side, taking these awesome conversion nodes. Actually, this is a very terrible wheel. I probably shouldn't take this because you don't really need penetration as Inquisitor. Then go over to the right, Mind Over Matter with actually Eldritch Battery with Diadem, but I'll get to that in a second. Getting a little bit of crit. Arcane Expanse because they actually moved it to be in a decent place now, so I can get some good AoE there. Force Shaper, Arcane Swiftness, all that good stuff, and the EK Threshold Jewel, and I'll talk about that in a second as well. As far as skills go, I'm basically not really sure how I want to be getting my knives out there. All I know is it's pretty much going to be either Blade Fall or EK. Blade Fall kind of has these, like, the more you scale down the AoE, the more concentrated the knives are going to be. So I figured if I could do like an Intensify consecrated effect setup, then I could really sort of dial in and get a lot of tiny little Blade Blast AoE. So hopefully this would be the good single target version of creating knives. Ethereal knives, on the other hand, and the reason why I was probably going to be using the Threshold Jewel, even though it is pretty inefficient stat-wise, is because if I use Greater Volley, Greater Multiple Projectiles, and Unleash, assuming Greater Volley does not override this sort of Nova tag that you get with the Ring of Blades Threshold Jewel, then that means every time I click, I'll be shooting out 28 knives all around me. I think it's 28, make sure, no, 23 knives all around me, and then Unleash will multiply that times 4, and I'll just be creating knives all over the screen with enough projectile speed that could potentially mean like off screen as well. And then after that, I click once with Blade Blast, and that's actually what this level 14 EK setup is, because that's about the same base damage, and then hopefully that will detonate all of them. I'm really not 100% sure that this is going to work as well as I'm hoping, but that's sort of why I have the different setups here. It's either going to be Blade Fall, EK, or Blade Fall with maybe like a increased area of effect and a spell cascade to get a little bit more coverage. It's really going to require a lot of experimenting. I do think the numbers on Blade Blast are such that you're going to have a good time with this. It's not going to be a huge deal, but it's just going to require a lot of experimenting. Hopefully within the first day or two, people will have figured out what the optimal way to get your knives out are, but for now, this is the tree that I went with. And oh, I should talk about one more thing. Part of the reason why I have Diadem and Queen's Hunger on here, which is typically not something you would want to include in any starters, is because I plan on farming Katarina at the start of the league, regardless of what I'm playing, and that's just because a lot of people are just going to be trying to set up their syndicate properly for the first time because Zizurn put out that guide, and then also there's just been this stigma going around that you should just never kill Katarina. It's always the wrong decision, and I kind of want to just do the opposite of that. One, to get a little bit of star currency, and then two, just because I have not interacted with Katarina in a while, because I've been doing Syndicate the right way for so many leagues now. I think it would be fun to sort of just focus on farming her, just killing that boss at least, you know, every few missions that I'm able to sort of unlock her, and then after a week or two, I'll sort of transition into a Scarab strategy for that more passive income from Betrayal. Okay, next up we have what I'm calling basically a Unleash Magma Orb Sire of Shards Hierophant. Now, Sire of Shards Magma Orb is a pretty common interaction. You basically put in the 2 Threshold Jewels, you grab a Sire of Shards, and then you're going to be getting a very easy 7 projectiles. And due to this, you just have a really nice clear speed. You sort of run around, you just click once and then bam, you're just shooting out tons of projectiles. It's like going in a big 360 around you. The damage is very solid, and it's just all around a very nice interaction. I think some people have even made dedicated Legion farmers with this, if I remember from Legion League proper. But even if you're not farming Legion, it's just a nice build, and Magmorb has some nice single target potential. The other thing that I want to do with this build, and this is very different from pretty much any other way people I think have been playing with the Sire of Shards sort of Magmorb interaction, is to focus heavily on Unleash. And that means using Woke Unleash, which is in my opinion going to be pretty cheap. I think as soon as those hit the market, they're probably going to be on the sub 1 Exalt mark, because people just love to sleep on Unleash and just not use it in their builds. And Woke Unleash, I know it says 23% less damage right now, but after the buffs go live, that's going to be 8% less damage, which means every time you get a repeat for your Unleashed, it's like barely going to deal any less damage. It's almost going to be like a true 300-400% multi every time you click. Not like overall DPS, but on that specific cast you're going to get massive amounts of repeated damage. Another reason why I want to do that is because you can get these +1 Unleash seals on your helmet, as well as the Thunderous Salvos Anoint, so you can get up to 5 seals, I think that would be total. So you cast once, and then you get 5 more casts after that, which is pretty nutty. I have to imagine that's going to be some good damage. And then also I plan to treat a level 90, as well as making room for this little guy right here, so we can eventually get that notable, hopefully it won't be too hard to get, that allows you to reseal your Unleash gem 30% faster. It's really hard to math out the exact DPS on a build like this, but as far as clicks go, I mathed it out to deal around 795k damage per click, and that's if I'm using a level 5 Woke Unleash. Literally like 795k worth of Magma Orbs, assuming they all hit a target. And then if they hit the same target, 2 or 3 times, that's going to of course double or triple it, because Magma Orb is a ability with enough AoE can very easily shotgun on itself. I can also switch weapons for single target, like Sire of Shards over to Martyr of Innocence. That also bumps it up quite a bit. Let's see, where is that? What would that take me to? That would be about 50% more damage. And then if I really want to meme it up, I can get the Helm Enchant with +2 chains, and I can also get Gloomfang, and that's just getting into crazy levels of damage for a low cost. Overall, I mean, other than that, it's just sort of a mana Hierophant. I played kind of one of these for my Orb of Storms, Storm's Gift, and Pulse the character last league, and they kind of just build themselves. You just take a little bit of life, you try to scale some crit, you take these really nice sort of staff, cast speed, global crit nodes, get a little bit of mana. Character kind of built itself, not super complicated, but overall I think this will be a pretty safe starter, assuming I can get that Sire of Shards like day 2, and then I can farm Katarina like I want to, which will hopefully give me that Cinder Swallow earlier than your average league starter build. The next build I want to talk about, I was kind of questioning whether or not I wanted to include this, because I technically theory crafted this one like about a week ago, and it's also not the strongest thing in the world, but I just wanted to sort of put a couple more ideas out there, and I might end up playing this anyway, so it would be kind of just disingenuous to not talk about it. And what it is a Shattering Steel Deadeye. Engineering Eternity made a guide for basically what you're looking at here back in Legion League when Shattering Steel was, I want to say, first introduced. That might have actually been in Synthesis, but I think he made this one in Legion League, and I kind of just wanted to put my own twist on it. Instead of going things like Rupture and Fast and Deadly, I kind of wanted to go in on the Tailwind, the additional projectile, and Ricochet, which I think will probably feel a little bit better in terms of clear, and hopefully have overall more endgame damage scaling with the additional projectile. Everything else is pretty standard, just get a nice amount of crit, physical scaling. You get your 100% chance to impale from just Swift Skewering, and the gem itself has a nice clean little 40% chance to impale all on its own. Very cool. A little bit of strength, iron grip scaling, soul of steel. Everything is just pretty standard for like a projectile based impale attack build, aka Shattering Steel. But this is what I'm working here, and I'm really happy with the amount of damage we're getting. A very easy 1.5 mil with nothing too crazy. The Dying Sun is a little bit silly, but we're still looking at over 1 million damage. And then if we take the Scavas and we replace them with Bell Timbers, which are kind of a little expensive early league, because they just drop from higher end bosses, aka Elder Guardians, but they aren't super meta. So I'm guessing they're going to drop into the sort of 10 chaos range by sort of day 3, day 4, and we're looking at a pretty clean 2.3 mil setup on what is not that bad of a clear skill. I really do think it'll feel okay, and if I really want, I can sub Belly of the Beast for like an explodey crit chest, and yeah, I would lose a significant amount of life, dipping well below that 6k mark, but hey, I'd actually get some really good clear as well. I'm probably not going to play this versus the other melee stuff that I'm talking about today, but I still thought it was kind of a cool option. Of course, I'll be putting the path to building in the description below. If any of you guys haven't tried out Shattering Steel, I think Shattering Steel Deadeye is definitely a little bit of an archetype people sleep on, and they mostly just stick to champion so they can sort of like Papega and sit there just single target away, whereas I think the Shattering Steel Deadeye is a little bit more well-rounded. Next up, we have the aptly named EQ Starter Forehead, because starting Earthquake is not something I would typically recommend. It's a skill that does like a lot of helpers, like for example, the Helm enchant, the Shockwave support, having a very decent staff, mace, or just any strong two-hander to work with when there's really not a lot of good unique two-handers that you can just use unless you're going axes, in my opinion. But I didn't want to go axes, I wanted to go staves, so I could actually use Shockwave support. Shockwave support is something they introduced in Legion. It's very strong. I don't know why more people don't think about it. I think it's just because you have to use it with staves and scepters and maces, and people don't like those base types. But what Shockwave is basically it's a big old 210% of base damage nuke that hits every time the attack skill you're supporting hits as well. It does have a 1 second cooldown that scales down a tiny little bit. Yeah, it scales down to 0.65 with the items that I have here. So as long as you're not hitting too fast, you can proc this pretty reliably every time you click. More on the build. Basically, this is a pretty standard EQ Slayer. We get a lot of goodies here just sort of for being Slayer and also being staves. For example, we get to have Overleech, we get to have Stun Immunity, we get to have Reflect Immunity, we get to have absurd amounts of area of effect from Impact. We get to have this, we also get to have the reduced damage taken while leeching from Brutal Fervor. We get to have endurance charges from Smashing Strikes. We even technically get to have power charges if we block a little bit, and we do have a 24% chance to block, so it's not that unrealistic to get a power charge or two while clearing. Overall, I just think there's a lot to like about this build. Really, the only question mark is how hard it's going to be to get the required stuff, because there are a couple of weird things here that I have. First of all, Calm's Heart. Of course, this is not realistic. You're not going to be getting this day one. So if you take that off, it's like 5.6k life. If you put it back on, it's 7k life. It's whatever. I don't have to use the Calms, but it's going to be nice when I do get that. The staff itself, I really don't know what the best way to sort of craft a usable staff for cheap is, but I imagine it's going to be the flat damage essences along with the benchcraft for increased damage. Luckily, we do not need or want attack speed, so I don't have to worry about having a super high DPS number. I just need to have a very strong hit, and maybe a little bit of local crit would be cool too, but not required. So this is going to be kind of tricky to craft. I'll probably just want to get myself like a, I don't know, whatever I can fucking find while I'm leveling, and then eventually craft a essence staff. That's going to be huge. And then really the big question mark of all of this is the Earthquake Helm enchant. PoE Antiquary seems to think that it's worth around 50 chaos day one of the league, at least for the past year or so worth of helm enchants. I mean, that's a little steep for me. Usually there's a lot of other stuff I want to invest in, so I don't know if I'll be able to get this day one. But if I do decide to play this build and start with this build, I'm going to have to chase that reduced Earthquake duration enchant. Otherwise, DPSing is going to require me to walk in circles, basically hit, walk, and I will not be able to hunker down and just hit the ground for maximum deeps, or else it's going to totally mess up my shockwave cooldown as well as my sort of aftershock proc. Basically, if I'm doing it correctly and I have the helm enchant, that's going to be every time I click, I get these really cool 4 hits off that actually makes impale scaling not feel terrible. But if I don't have the helm enchant, it's just like things are going to be out of whack. My impales are going to take too long to ramp up. It's just going to overall, feel pretty bad. Otherwise, this build is not too bad. As far as damage is going, if I can get everything that I have here in the item side, and really nothing super crazy. We have steel rings here with like all attributes, like a rustic sash with cooldown recovery. Oh, this is one thing. I do need the cooldown recovery shaper belt. Kind of oof, but I mean, it's fine. As long as I only need the cooldown recovery and I don't chase other stats, it's not going to be too crazy, even day one of the league. Anyway, yeah, so the damage is looking at around 1 million total per click. Every time I click, it's going to proc 2 shockwaves, and aftershock and initial hit. All of that together is worth about 1 million. After impale stacks up, it's around 2 million. And then if I'm just sitting there clicking, my sustained DPS is going to be around 2.8 million, which is not half bad for a 440 P DPS staff with no crit on it. Overall, I really want to start with this build. I'm worried about the Helm Enchant making it too difficult for, you know, some casual trash player like me, but I do want to start this. This is definitely a very fun looking starter and is at the top of my personal list. Here we have the Viper Strike Assassin. Now, for anybody who is like familiar with poison builds and really knows what they're doing, this is probably going to be a very cringe section of the video because I'm actually not super familiar with poison. The only poison build I've ever played extensively was a Scourge Arrow Prolift Pathfinder that I played to like level 89 or something last league, which is really not significant at all, so I could be making some glaring errors, but this is what I came up with when I was trying to come up with a very budget Viper Strike tree that would deal really nice single target and hopefully not have a terrible clear speed thanks to Beanos and Ancestral Call. Yeah, otherwise it's pretty standard. I decided to scale daggers. Probably a bad idea, making my leech rate just absolutely terrible. If I wanted to have good sustain, I would go claws, but when I was messing around with the claw tree, I was getting just marginally less DPS with a wasp's nest, which didn't even make sense to me. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, but I was getting a little bit less DPS, and then obviously I wasn't going to have access to that Beanos clear. So yeah, I decided to go for daggers, mainly so I could just equip Beanos on a good conscience. Nothing else is super crazy. We got the Viper Strike Threshold Jewel here, so we can like really, you know, meme it up and look at our infinite damage numbers by adding a bunch of poisons. Realistically, I think 10 poisons is fine if we want to like take a look at what our ramped DPS looks like. A little bit low on the life side, but hey, we got that phase acro. We got the slightly nerfed elusive. We have survivalist. Overall, I mean, I think it's just a very chill, ethical starter, maybe a little bit on the squishy side, but everything about it's pretty fine. I don't think there's anything crazy here. And nothing super out of the question for like a day 2, day 3 sort of scenario. I did put the cherubims because the life leech per second really helps make up the absolute terrible sustain that is trying to rely on hit-based, like generic hit-based leech for a poison build. But even that wasn't quite enough, you know. It's like, well, we're getting like 730 back per second. I think I really have to rely on dodge more than anything else not to die all the time on this build. But other than that, you know, that aside, I think this could be a very nice starter. I'm not really likely to start as it just because I have a lot of other melee stuff that's looking cool. But if I really want a reliable, cheap, single target oriented build, this could be a good one. Also, this is 2.9 mil DPS, and if I just sort of like swap this guy out here, melee fizz, it becomes 4.3 mil DPS. I need to hit the shit out of a boss. I think I have to hit for like 10 seconds before this is actually correct. But I mean, hey, Viper Strike is the POB warrior skill, so you know, why not have high numbers? That's that's the point of this build. Next up, we have a build that I am just completely unnecessarily and irrationally excited to potentially start as, and that is the fully ethical. No jokes, no trickery, nothing special, just a classic Cleave Slayer. This is a character that just scales max leech rate. We have a nice little sort of brutal fervor. We have Val Pact. We have Gladiator's Perseverance. We even have the Hematophagy that I always mispronounce, so please don't make fun of me too hard in the comments. We have this guy right here for a lot of nice max leech rate. We have a very respectable 2 million DPS. It's actually a little bit higher, but the melee distance from enemy and this right here and impact is like super bugged right now, so we can't actually get a reasonable number. All the gear, totally pedestrian, nothing special. We have a Belly of the Beast, Starkonja even, which is like such a subpar helmet in a lot of ways, but because of how they sort of changed how fossil crafting works, Starkonja is looking like a much simpler, easier choice for early league gearing. A couple of Scavas. It's just very simple. Really, there's nothing about this build that's super crazy. I do need a little bit of accuracy on my gloves. That's a little bit annoying, but not a big deal. I can just run precision instead of pride early league. Oh, one thing that I do like about this build, actually the only thing that's like really stand out is if you set Cleave to level 21, not too crazy, and you go Sand Stance, you can see the AoE is just nutty. We're looking at a radius of 55 on Cleave, and that is thanks to the Threshold Jewel, which gives you up to +10 radius on your Cleave, depending on how many nearby enemies there are. Obviously, you're always going to have 10 nearby enemies if you are mapping. And then you also get that additional AoE per enemy killed recently, and obviously I set 50. You know, you can just set it to 10, it's whatever. So as long as you're sort of like mapping, you have that momentum up, you're going to have a really nice AoE experience. Obviously that drops the DPS a little because of Sand Stance. Then you switch back to Blood Stance. You do that good DPS. It's actually closer to more like 2.2 or something after the impact sort of benefits, but you know, we can't actually see that right now because path ability is big borked. But yeah, overall, this is just a very simple ethical build. I think really the big question mark I had, I was talking with my friend Core about this, is whether or not to play this as Gladiator for challenger charges, because Gladiator does get very similar, just slightly less DPS, while also getting to zoom around very fast with Arena Challenger. However, I decided I really do like Overleech more, and I do love seeing these really fun big old AoE radius number for my AoE EPing. But yeah, that's that. I think this is a really cool character, really basic, really generic ethical stuff. But if I want to start as Cleave, this is a build that I've been thinking about a lot and is definitely going to be near the top of my list. Last but not least, we have not so much a build, but more of a template build. And this is because I know you guys know that I'm excited, and I know a lot of you guys are excited based on the comments I've been reading about making just fully committed into Warcry builds thanks to the fantastic new cluster jewels we're going to have available to us, or passives, whatever you want to call them. So this is basically my idea of a template tree for anybody who wants to sort of all in the idea of focusing on these Warcries. We're only at level 68 right now in terms of the points required to get to this, and it's basically just a defensive tree at this point. We don't have any damage scaling. I guess we have like Born to Fight. You're always going to take that unless you decide to go Ellie for some reason. I don't think oh yeah, it's crit. You do want to be crit for this tree, obviously, because crit is going to be the way you're going to actually scale your damage to reasonable amounts. We have Battle Cry, which is going to be required for any Warcry build to not feel terrible. We have Words of Glory, which I actually, you know, allocated it over here just because I didn't want to sort of write in the notes that you need to anoint it, but I would recommend anointing this instead, since the pathing nodes are kind of suspect. The buff effect is nice, but like having to take this extra strength node when you're probably going to be getting lots of buff effect and cooldown recovery speed from cluster jewels anyway, probably not that good. But yeah, overall, I just think this is going to be a tree that is going to have a lot of potential to build off of. You can do a lot of different things. If you want to go, you know, one-handers, you would just sort of like allocate this instead of this. You know, if you wanted to go shield or two-handers, you would do those. If you wanted to go axes, you would fill in this wheel, and this wheel. If you wanted to go swords, you would fill in this wheel, and then you would go down here. This would be really value because you would go down here, and then suddenly you have access to this right here without having to take an extra point. And because you do have to take an extra point here if you're choosing to anoint the Words of Glory. So yeah, this is really just meant to be a flexible template tree, and really all you need to do is make sure you scale a little bit of crit, get a little bit of survivability. And by the way, the reason why we're casually invested into Inexorable and Stamina is because you're going to be running Enduring Cry, and it's going to be really important to actually get the most out of those endurance charges, especially because I chose Aspect of Carnage. These are the nodes I chose, by the way, and this probably looks a little bit weird, but Blitz is going to be just a really nice feel-good node for Zerker. Warbringer is going to be the way you really keep spamming those war cries and also get the crazy healing. Every time you pop this, 25% of your health and mana back, bam, just like that. And then Aspect of Carnage for the damage scaling. If you want, you can go Pain Reaver instead, and then you just don't have to take this. You don't have to path for that, but that's also a great way to just murder your damage. I think Aspect of Carnage is really strong with War Cries because you get so much generic increased damage from Rallying Cry and all of the new nodes. So getting this nice more multiplier really scales nicely. But yeah, the way you would kind of just scale on this is you would just try to path your way over to one of these large artist sockets, probably this one, or this one. If you're going to go swords, it'd be really good, especially. And you just build out of it. You just try to get the nodes like intimidates nearby enemies. You really want to get the rage nodes. That's why we didn't go for the triple rage, because you can get very good rage generation. You get the one that gives you huge amounts of crit chance and crit multi. You can do the ones that give you even area of effect on your Abyssal Cry, and enemies take increased damage. That could give you really nice clear speed. As far as skills go, you can play whatever the hell you want. I would probably play it as Cyclone, because instant war cries feels really good with Cyclone. You're just spinning around sort of like yelling at people. Overall, this is just meant to be a template. I know this is not a real build, but if anybody is like just really thinks they can make those cluster jewels work, and you're willing to potentially risk the chance that those are very rare and gated behind late game item level jewels, if you're willing to take that chances, by all means, you know, fucking roll this build, you have like a very, very easy sort of, you know, 20 to 30 points to spend here. And even if you can't spend all of those points, which I doubt you'll be able to, you can sort of path up here. You can sort of path up here for more life. You can, you know, path over here for more life. You can get twin terrors if you really need accuracy or something. You'll still have a lot of points to spare. Is just a very template tree. And I'm just mainly, the main takeaway here is the crit, the endurance charges, the Warcry nodes, and of course my choices for the Berserker Ascendancy. Hopefully that pushes you in the right direction. I don't really recommend starting with it because I think it's scary to try to focus and rely on cluster jewels for a build to work when we don't know how rare they're going to be. But, you know, if you're crazier than me, I made this template for a reason, and I will probably be resorting back to it once I figure out how viable and easy it is to work Warcries into any build. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. My name's Nathan. I'm going to be live tomorrow. As soon as the league starts, it's at 3 p.m. Central Time. I'll probably go live at like 2 or 2:30 as soon as my Steam client gets done patching. Don't give me shit about that. They said they're going to be fixing it soon, which is why I'm still using the Steam client instead of the main client. But yeah, after that, I'm going to go live. I'll try to push to at least maps while I'm live. Then I'll be transitioning over to early white maps and yellow maps by day 2. I'll go live on that too, and hopefully we can be killing some bosses and seeing some late game Delirium content by the end of the first week. That's my goal. Either way, I'm really excited. We have a lot of cool builds here. None of them are super groundbreaking or unique, but they look fun to me. And if I had to pick one that I'm leaning towards, it's probably a tie between the Earthquake character or the Unleash Magma Orb character. Or the Cleave character. One of those 3. Those are like my top 3. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. My name's Nathan, and I will see you in Delirium.
Thank you!
Thank you so much to my Patreon supporters, Real Human, Zikarak, Squally, Zoljan, Coda, Julia, Allen, Kepler, Sparky Kata, Putzak, Heiser 801, Kyle, Logan, Icedude, Ginzik, Anonymous, Orangina, Marius, Alex, and Lloyd. Welcome to the team. Thank you so much for supporting me on Patreon. Really means a lot. Thank you so much. If anyone else is interested in joining these awesome people at my Patreon, you can check me out at patreon.com/NathanBrotherBob, or if you have a Twitch Prime laying around and you want to support me in another way, you can check me out when I stream on Twitch, which is usually Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 2 p.m. Central Time, even though I am streaming sort of more sporadically and more often than not right now due to league start times. And if you don't have any monies to support me, because that's fine too, you can join my Discord in the bottom right-hand corner, which I know I was asked in the comments to put the font on the different sort of like lower and upper cases, but apparently this font doesn't seem to know how to do lower cases, and yeah, that's rather unfortunate. I think maybe I should just sort of redo my whole branding because this font kind of sucks anyway. Honestly, this shit looks kind of cheap. I should probably improve that. But yeah, I'll get around to it. Anyway, thanks guys. Good luck in Delirium. Bye.